Before we get started on today's video, I just wanted to let you guys know my daughter started her own YouTube channel. And if you're interested in finding out more about our area, she's a big history buff and she kind of adds some history to our local area. I'll leave a link to her channel down in the description below. Okay, so we are going to just do a test drive down our graveled road here. We're told it's in third gear is when we have problems. Obviously we can't get up to speed to go through all the gears on a graveled road, so we're just gonna put it in low range and drive it in low range and see what she does. So Keen went ahead and got it in low range. That's that green hill mountain light that's on the dash. So we're gonna go ahead and drive. So usually in low range you start out in second gear, so we should feel the third gear issue fairly quick. So that should be third gear. So she really doesn't want to come out of third gear. There we go, transmission fault. So now we have a transmission fault. So we're going to go ahead and turn it off, stop, turn it off, reset the transmission, and we'll try to go through manual gears and we'll see what it does. Now we're just going to go in, check the scan tool to see if we can read the codes. So we're going to do system selection, transmission. Okay, we're just going to check the codes real quick, see what it told us. And there's our code, P0783, the 3 to 4 shift. It's temporary code. So Keen's trying to do a manual shift with it now. So he commands it to go to the fourth gear, but it won't go. So now we got a check engine light and a transmission light. Well, it's another beautiful morning. Got snow on the mountain peaks. And today we got the LR4 in the shop to figure out if we need to swap the tranny or if it's something simple, and we'll kind of go over what it could be. It could be a shift solenoid. I have an extra set of those used. It could be the seal between the valve body and the transmission housing. And that's what we're going to check today. We're going to drain the oil, drop the pan, and pull the valve body and check the seal. They're notorious to crack and leak, and then it doesn't build pressure, so it can't shift. So it's kind of the thought process on that. So we're going to get this up on jack stands, pull the valve body, inspect the seals. If the seals are cracked, then we'll go ahead and order new seals. If the seals aren't cracked, then we'll probably swap the solenoids over and try it that way and see if that fixes the issue. And if that doesn't fix the issue, then we know we'll be having to swap trannies. Now, we need to do timing work on this. There's no codes on it. There's no check engine light. But I can kind of hear some chain slap, and there's no record of it ever being done. So the plan is to pull the motor and tranny. I think there's a seal on the transfer case that's also leaking. So I'm just going to pull it all out as one, like I did with the wife's LR4. And then it's so much easier to work on and do the timing properly and not be, struggling to get those camshafts set in the right positions. So that's the plan. If we have to swap the tranny, we're pulling everything. And then we'll do everything and do a good video on that. I'll probably do a step-by-step video on engine removal. So without any further ado, we'll get this thing up on jack stands, start draining the oil. All right, so we're crawling underneath this Land Rover. And according to the previous owner, they'd already done a fluid and filter change. So not sure if that's true. This still got a plastic pipe pan on it. But we're going to assume that they didn't, because I'm going to put a new updated metal pan with a replaceable filter and we'll go from there. But first thing we're going to do is drain the oil, which is right, bugs are out tonight, which is right there. It's a number 10 Allen head. So we'll break that loose and we're just going to let it drain. Once it's done draining, I'll show you what we do next. After we've let this drain completely out, we went ahead and put the plug back in just so we don't make any mess, because you're still going to have drips coming out nonstop. So instead of it dripping on you, just put the plug back in. Next thing we're going to do is get a 1/2-inch breaker bar with a number 18 socket, and we're going to break loose this bolt. This is a captured nut, so this one won't turn. You just need your breaker bar on this side to break it loose, and then we'll remove that after we get a jack under here. You'll want to get a jack to support the transfer case, and then once you pull the bolt out, we'll be able to raise it up about 1 inch. Just got to be careful not to crush anything, and then that gives us more access to get to the bolts that are on the front and rear cross members by the transmission. So that's where the tight sections are. So I'm going to go ahead and break this nut loose, or this bolt loose, get a jack under here, jack it up, and we'll continue to take the oil pan off. All right, we got the jack underneath transfer case, got it raised up. You can see it's not a lot, but any little bit helps. And I started taking out my Torx bits. So I use my nut driver, bit driver, to zip out the ones I can get to, but I leave 2 in the middle that are easy to get to on both sides, or 1 on each side, 2 total. That way it holds my pan up. But I got everything else, all the other ones that I could get with my drill zipped out. So then I'll use my 1/4-inch tool to get these above the crossband where my drill doesn't fit. That's what I'll work on next. Something to note, this is an LR4. It's pretty much the same as an LR3, except you don't have to deal with the heat shield. On an LR3, when you do this, you got to pull a heat shield off. Then you got to pull the heat shield bracket off, which is a real pain because the real tight fit to get to the number 10 bolts that they have holding it on. So that's a benefit. Makes it easier on an LR4. They did away with it. So we'll get those removed. Let me get the rest of these removed, and I'll try to record how I remove the filter and pan together. Okay, so I have all the bolts removed except for these 2. Something I forgot to mention, you'll need to remove your skid plate. That gives you access, easier access to get these front bolts above the cross member here. And then to get the ones above the cross members, I just use this 1/4-inch drive flex head ratchet with a T30 1/4-inch drive adapter and bit. So now all we have left to do is we'll zip these out. Okay, good chance it's probably going to make a little bit of mess, but should just drop down like that. Okay, so now this is where a lot of people will use like a hacksaw or handsaw to cut that filter. I don't. This is what I do. I just kind of stabilize it. Just give it a good twist and a shove, and she should break loose. And now we spin it around carefully. Try not to spill too much oil like that. Set it on the ground. Make sure we got our piece and the O-ring came out with it. Otherwise you'll have to pull the O-ring out. But that's how I pull it off. Just kind of give it a twist and snap it, and she comes right off. You can see it breaks right at the base every time. So that's that. So I'll get this out of the way, I'll get cleaned up, and then we'll look at, here's our shift solenoids back here. We'll look at getting these removed and putting on the spares that I have. Okay, so we got the pan off, the filter off. So now we're gonna remove the valve body. The seals we're looking to inspect are behind, above this valve body. So you'll notice there's two different size Torx bolts. You have the smaller one like that, and then the larger ones like that. So you're gonna wanna remove those larger ones, and that should allow us to drop them down. The other smaller ones is what bolts the valve body, sandwiches it together as one assembly. We wanna remove it as one complete assembly. And then we'll also, before we do this, we'll need to disconnect the connector on the back of the transmission by pulling, we'll pull that white tab right there down. Usually, probably can't do it on camera. We'll slide this down, that unlocks it, and then we'll disengage the pigtail or the wiring harness from the back of the transmission, pull it out, and then we can pull the valve body. All right, let's get to it. All right, we got the valve body out of the LR4, and I would say this probably has never been changed, which is crazy. This fluid is just dirty, and you can actually see much of the residue. I mean, usually you see that in the bottom of your pan, but this is on the top of the valve body. So this transmission was neglected. This vehicle does have high mileage. I believe it's like 220,000 miles. Still running and driving, but it doesn't want to shift out of third gear. So I'm going to try to replace the solenoids on it. We have an extra set from, here's the valve body that we pulled out of our $1,500 one. I feel the solenoids were not the issue on that one, which is actually the TCM, which is this piece right here. So this bolts on top of your valve body like this and goes into those solenoids like that. Each solenoid has an electrical connection. You can kind of see it right there. So I'm going to replace all the solenoids, swap them over, and see if that fixes it. And then it'll have a new filter, new pan, and new oil in it. And we'll run it and we'll see. And also the little sealing sleeve that goes into the electrical connection. So we're going to replace that, and it's going to be new pan and filter and new fluid. Everything else is parts we already had. So we'll see. If that fixes it, great. If it doesn't, then we'll be pulling the transmission out of our $500 Land Rover, which only has, I think, 80 or 90,000 miles on it. So another reason to have a good parts car. All right, so to remove this TCM, you're going to have to pull screws off the bottom, and this whole unit comes off. So this piece, all this plastic, you'll want to pull up. It's kind of, you don't want to just bend it and force it. You want to get all the screws out. It's going to make a mess when I flip it over, but I'll show you the screws that need to come out. You want to be careful. You want to keep it clean where you're working at. Lay down some clean towels. But we're going to be pulling off this one. See if I can do this. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And then moving back, you'll do this one and this one. Then these two. Then coming back here, you'll do this one and this one. And I think that's it. I'll double check once I get these out. Oh, and then we'll be pulling all these out. And this little metal bracket is actually what holds the solenoids in. The solenoids plug into this, so you can remove this now or after you pull the TCM. It's up to you. I'll probably remove them all right now. I'll have it upside down and then pull the TCM off and then inject. All right, so we got the TCM off the valve body. You can kind of see this thing's pretty dirty. I just wiped this down. I'm gonna go through and clean all this up, wipe it up, but I'll show you. I went ahead and removed the little retaining plate for the shift solenoids. You can see it just slides up after you pull the screws up. And then you can remove each individual solenoid just by pulling back on it carefully. So I'll go ahead and get these swapped over, get everything cleaned up. All right, so I went ahead and swapped over all the solenoids. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'll flip it over and put our little keeper bracket on there, and then I'll put the TCM on. You can tell I went ahead and cleaned this up, just wiping it down. I'm gonna do a little bit more as well, just to get all that residue. But look at these solenoids I pulled out. Some aren't as bad as others, but you can't. That's a screen. There's a screen on the end of each one and a screen there. See if I can get it to focus a little better. So look how bad some of these are. So definitely needs oil service. You know, Land Rover will say that it's got lifetime fluid. Don't follow that. Go by ZF is the one that makes this transmission, and they recommend, I think, every 50 to 60,000 miles change the fluid and filter. So that's what I'm going to do every 50,000. Keep it simple, and we'll see how long we can get out of this. I'm hoping this fixes it. Got all our solenoids back in place, and we'll button this up and try to get this running tomorrow. All right, it's the next day. This we got cleaned up yesterday. She's all put back together, ready to be installed on the LR4. So I'm just going to clean up underneath, wipe everything down, and we'll get this thing installed. Get a new pan and filter on it. I got an upgraded pan and filter right there. This one's from Atlantic British. I'd ordered it a long time ago for another project. So we'll use it on this one, and then we'll fill it up. Again, it takes about, you can get it just under 3 quarts into the transmission, put the plug back in, and then we'll have to run it, turn it on, and then add another 3.5 to 4 more quarts. So it takes a total of 6.5 to 7 quarts. So you basically fill it up until, well, with it running, after you've driven, you're putting it through the gears. I leave it up on my jack stands and just put it through all the gears, all the transmission positions, and then it needs to be warmed up. I usually get it to around 120, 130 degrees, and then you should have approximately 1 drop per second coming out of the fill plug, and that's where it's full. And then we'll do a transmission reset and take it for a test drive. We're getting ready to finish adding the oil to our 2011 LR4 that we picked up. Again, this is the blue one that we picked up that ran and drove, but would not shift at a 3rd gear and go into transmission fault. So what I did was change out the shift solenoids. I swapped them out with a set that I had from another project. They are not new. It was actually from our $1,500 Land Rover when I pulled the valve body TCM off with that one, because the TCM was bad. So I'm hoping that the solenoids were good. They only had about 140,000 miles on them. This vehicle has approximately 220,000 miles on it. And you can see how dirty it is. Not super well taken care of. Does have orange coolant in it. So again, the only thing that we've done, we haven't changed the oil, engine oil. We haven't done anything. No filters. We just did the transmission shift solenoids, a new upgraded filter and pan. So it's got the metal pan, replaceable filter, and it's going to have fresh oil. So I'm going to go in and check the engine oil. Then we're going to go in and review the scan codes. The battery's been disconnected from this for a while. Okay, so here's the code we were getting. It's a P0783-07 temporary 3 to 4 shift. So like I said, driving characteristics, shifted fine, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, then from 3rd to 4th, it just hangs up, like it tries to shift, can't shift, and then goes into transmission fault mode, which I think sticks it in 3rd gear. I don't know, pretty gutless, but that's the code that we have. So now that we changed out shift solenoids, I'm going to clear the code. Yes. Okay. So then if we go back in, we shouldn't get any codes if we read them. No fault codes detected. So the next thing we're going to do is pull up transmission temperature, because we're going to need to monitor transmission temperature while we're filling it. I'm going to start it. Right now we have 3 quarts or 3 liters of oil in the transmission approximately, and can't fill any more. So now we start it, and then we'll add 3 more. That puts a total of 6. And then once I do the 6th one, while it's running, we'll get up here and shift it through the different ranges. It's up on jack stands. All 4 wheels are up off the ground. Parking brake is engaged. We will shift it through, wait for the temperature to get up to 100 and I think it's 120, 130 degrees. I'll double check that. And then once it's up to temperature, you top it off until you get oil dripping out of the fill plug at a rate of approximately 1 drip per second. And then you put your plug in. It does make a little bit of a mess, so you need a drain pan or you expect a little oil on your floor. So that's what we're going to do now. Let me get this thing fired up, get underneath it, start adding some oil. It's just me down here doing this. Kids are doing school. It's easier if you have 2 or 3 people. Usually I have my daughter inside controlling the transmission, my son squeezing the oil, and I'm down underneath. You will, to fill it, you'll be close to one of the catalytic converters. I wear rubber gloves just to kind of give me a little extra layer of protection from getting burned, so keep that in mind. It is kind of a messy process, and you can get burned, so be careful. All right, let's get this thing going. Okay, so we got 6 quarts of oil in there. Went ahead and started it. Monitoring my temperatures. And I just went through, just shifted it from park, reverse, neutral, drive, gave it a few seconds in each one. Just did that several times. Temperature's coming up nicely. So once it gets up to temperature, we'll use that last or that seventh quart to top it off. I've seen it take anywhere from half to full quart of that 7th one. So I'll get back under there, start adding the rest of the oil to it, and we'll be in good shape. We'll get it off jack stands and take it for a test drive. All right, we got the Land Rover out after changing the transmission filter and pan and new fluid. We're now gonna get ready for a test drive. Before we do that, we wanna reset the transmission adaptation. So on my Autel, after you read the VIN, you're not gonna go in the diagnostic menu, you're gonna go to the service menu. Go to powertrain and transmission control module adaptation clear. So you select that, and you just follow the prompts. Press OK. Set the ignition on. Move the gear shifter to park. It's in park. Hit OK. And it just kind of gives you what it's going to do. Press OK. So at some point it's going to ask you to check fault codes or clear fault codes. So that's towards the end. It's complete, so you press OK. Turn the ignition off. As you cycle the ignition a couple times, turn it on. So there shouldn't be any fault codes, but we'll go ahead and clear it anyways since we're going to take it for a test drive. We want to see if everything works properly. So again, all we've done so far is replace the solenoids, the shift solenoids, with a spare set that we had from a previous project. Change the transmission fluid, filter and pan, and the sealing collar around the electrical connector for the TCM. There's some other issues we got to fix. We just drove it around the road, just drove it down the driveway and on the property, and we can hear some rattling from the passenger right front suspension area. I'm pretty sure it's that stabilizer bar bracket that's missing. So and another thing we found is the front fan for the HVAC, the heating and air conditioning, doesn't seem to work either. So I'm gonna do some troubleshooting on that, and but we wanted to at least get this transmission figured out. Well, we just got back from our test drive, and unfortunately it's not a shift solenoid issue. That did not fix the problem. Still does not want to shift at a 3rd gear, and it goes into its transmission fault. So we're going to be swapping the tranny, which is not a big deal. I have 2 spares, so we plan on pulling the motor and swapping the tranny at the same time while we do the timing and update all the cooling parts and do some seals on the transfer case. So Unfortunately, I do apologize. I lost some video of where I inspected the seal between the valve body and the transmission. Just look for cracks on that. They're prone to leak, and then you'll have shifting problems, pressure problems. This one I inspected, it was not cracked or anything, so I went ahead and just put the valve body in. But that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for when we swap the tranny and pull the engine on this one. See you on the next one.